Jesus reveals. Nothing is missing when you trust in God. Have you ever looked at your life and felt like something was missing, but you don't know exactly what? As if there was an invisible hole in your chest, an absence that no one can see, but that screams silently inside you? You get up every day, do your duties, smile when you need to smile, but deep down, you feel like something is broken. And the most painful thing is realizing that even when you pray, even when you believe, even when you try to trust in God, this feeling of emptiness persists. It's like walking through an emotional desert, thirsty for meaning, but with your soul covered in dust and silence. And then, the doubt that corrodes begins to creep in. Has God forgotten about me? Is trusting in Him really enough, even when everything seems to be falling apart? What almost no one tells you, and what you may never have heard so clearly, is that this emptiness is not a lack. It is an invitation to a revelation that changes everything. A truth that has been muffled by the pressures of the world, by the noise of the soul, and by the lies you believe. But today, Jesus reveals what many spent their lives without seeing. Nothing is missing when you trust in God. This is not religious jargon. It is a spiritual key, a revelation that transforms the way you see your life, your pain, your path. Few people can access this truth because it requires more than superficial belief. It requires surrender, real faith, a leap into the dark with your eyes closed and your heart open. And if you've come this far, it's not by chance. There's something heaven wants to deliver to you. There's a message your soul has been silently begging you to hear, and it's being released now. But the most impactful part is yet to come. Because when Jesus reveals what you never understood about your pain, you realize that absence was, in fact, preparation. The lack was just the door to the miracle. Get ready, because what you're about to hear next could be the answer you've always been looking for. The revelation that will heal old wounds and show you that by trusting God fully, nothing, absolutely nothing, is missing from you. Take a deep breath and open your heart to this message. You are not here by chance. There is a spiritual reason for you to be in front of this video right now. Jesus brought you here because there is something He deeply desires to reveal to your heart, something that can completely change the way you face the pain you feel and the emptiness that accompanies you. There is a truth hidden in God's promises that few know, but that will be revealed to you today. Jesus revealed something very important about this feeling of lack, about this feeling of incompleteness, and you need to hear it before you leave this video. This is one of those words that arrive at just the right time, as an answer to silent prayers that no one heard, but that heaven listened to attentively. If this message has already started to mess with you, enjoy this video as an act of faith and evangelization. It's not just an ordinary gesture. It's a seed you plant so that others can be reached too. Every click you make helps this word reach other hearts who also need to discover that nothing is really missing when we learn to trust God fully. Subscribe to this channel now, because here you are not just another number. Here, we are a body, a spiritual community, seeking healing, direction, and presence. Each day, God releases something new through this journey. If you have been searching for answers, this is the place where they will come. You are not alone. And if this word is touching you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I open my heart to your revelation." Let this be your public act of faith, your surrender to the truth that is beginning to be born within you now. Prepare yourself, because God may speak directly to you today, and what He will reveal may be exactly what your soul has always silently cried out for. Have you ever felt like you were surrounded by everything, but something essential was still missing from you? Like the pieces were all in place, but the final image still seemed incomplete. This is the kind of emptiness that cannot be explained with words. It is a silence that screams, an absence that has no name, but that follows you like a shadow on good days and bad. You even smile, you even pray, you even give thanks. But something inside you keeps asking for more. And this is not ingratitude. It is thirst. Thirst for something eternal. for something that the world cannot give. This invisible pain, this feeling of being incomplete, is like being in front of a table set with plenty of things, but feeling hungry for what is not there. And this is exactly where Jesus comes in, not with explanations, but with revelations. This is what he did with the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. She was constantly searching for something to be fulfilled within herself. She had already been through 5 relationships and was in yet another that was not bringing her peace. Each new attempt was an effort to fill the hole in her soul. And in the midst of this painful cycle, Jesus finds her. Imagine the scene: scorching sun, a woman, tired of life, approaching the well not just for water but because she carries a dry heart. And there is Jesus sitting. He does not condemn her, does not point out her mistakes. He looks beyond appearances, he sees thirst, and he says something that changes everything. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. John 4:14. This sentence is a promise, a revelation, a direct answer to the pain of incompleteness. Jesus doesn't just offer comfort, he offers fulfillment. He doesn't deliver temporary relief, he offers permanent fulfillment. When we truly trust God, we discover that nothing is missing. What seemed like absence was just misplaced expectation. What seemed like lack was actually hunger for what is eternal. The Samaritan woman represented all of us who seek in things, people, and status something that only heaven can give us. She thought she needed a new relationship, a new chance, a new life. But what she really needed was a revelation, and Jesus gave it to her. He revealed that the thirst she felt was spiritual, and that only in him could she be completely satisfied. How many times have you tried to fill that hole with achievements, praise, distractions, and even after achieving what you thought you needed, the feeling of emptiness came back even stronger? It's because what's missing isn't material, it's revelation. Revelation that nothing is missing when you trust in God. Because when the source is within, what is outside no longer dictates your peace. And this doesn't mean that life will become perfect on the outside. It means that peace is no longer dependent on circumstances. It means that you may be walking through an external desert, but within you, there is a river that never runs dry. You may be surrounded by scarcity, but your heart will be a garden watered by God's promises. Jesus revealed something to that woman that no one had ever told her before. He saw her completely. He showed her that it was not she who was incomplete, but rather the world around her that had nothing to offer her. And when she understood this, she left her water jar behind and ran to tell others. Because when you discover that in Jesus you lack nothing, even that which once imprisoned you loses its power. Have you ever considered that perhaps this feeling of emptiness is not a flaw in you, but an indication that it is time to stop seeking in the world what only Jesus can deliver? Have you realized that your thirst is not for things, but for meaning? And that meaning is only found when you connect with the source. If this word is opening your eyes and touching your soul deeply, write in the comments, Jesus, I trust that I lack nothing in you. Make it a public declaration, a written prayer, a delivery in words, because every letter you type is a way of sealing this revelation in your heart. And if this message has spoken to you so far, watch this video as an act of faith. This is not just a gesture, it is a sending forth, a spiritual step that can make this same truth reach other people who are thirsty today without knowing why. But wait, what comes next may be even more revealing, because there is a pain that paralyzes many lives without them realizing it. Anxiety about the future. And Jesus has something profound to reveal about this. Something that can free your mind from the restlessness that saps your strength every day. It's strange how the mind can trap us in futures that haven't even happened yet. You try to live in the present, you try to trust, you try to rest, but anxiety comes like a silent storm. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of the night without warning, making your heart race and your thoughts race as if something terrible is about to happen. Other times, it hides behind smiles, meetings, and commitments, but inside, you are exhausted from carrying the weight of everything that could go wrong. There is a constant restlessness, as if something is about to collapse, even when everything seems stable. And then comes that painful question, am I really safe? Will God really take care of my tomorrow? This doubt, this lack of security that eats away at us from within, is more common than you might think. Anxiety about the future is one of the most silent and paralyzing pains of modern life, and often it doesn't manifest itself in tears or despair. It disguises itself as control. We try to control everything around us, decisions, people, outcomes, because we believe deep down that if we're not in control, something will go wrong. And that's when we start living by the power of prediction rather than by the power of faith. But there is a story that changes this perspective. A scene that reveals what happens when we let Jesus take real control of situations. Imagine a boat on the high seas. The sky begins to darken, the winds intensify, the waves rise like walls of fear. And there are the disciples, experienced seamen, but who, faced with the storm, find themselves completely vulnerable. They panic, they scream, they despair. And the most absurd thing? Jesus was with them, sleeping. Yes, sleeping. While everything seemed to be falling apart, while the water threatened to invade the boat and death seemed imminent, Jesus slept. Not out of carelessness, but out of dominion. Not out of absence, but out of authority. And then, in the midst of the chaos, the disciples wake him up, overcome with fear. And Jesus, with a simple gesture, calms the wind. With a single word, he silences the sea. And then he turns to them and asks, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Marcos 4:40. This question is more than a rebuke. It is a revelation. Jesus was saying, if you had known who was in this boat with you, you would not have been afraid. Because when you trust in God, the chaos doesn't disappear immediately, but your soul finds peace even in the midst of the storm. Anxiety about the future arises from the illusion that you are alone in the boat, that your tomorrow depends only on your strength, your strategy, or your foresight. But true faith begins when you understand that the presence of Jesus is what defines your security, not external circumstances. The wind may blow, the bills may increase, the answers may be delayed, but none of these have final power over your life when the author of time is with you. Now stop for a moment and think. How many times have you lost sleep over something that didn't even happen? How many times has the anguish of "what if" kept you from enjoying the present? How many decisions have you postponed or abandoned out of fear of the unknown? Anxiety, when not surrendered to God, becomes a prison disguised as prudence. But when you trust, truly trust, you begin to realize that you lack nothing, even when faced with uncertainty. Because where there is trust, there is invisible provision, there is rest, there is active faith. Jesus doesn't promise calm seas, but he does promise presence. He promises sustenance. He offers dominion over that which dominates you. And that's the key. What you cannot control, he already governs. What you cannot foresee, he has already prepared. What you fear losing, he can restore. So take a deep breath now. Feel this truth come to you as a relief. Your future is not in the hands of chance. It is in the hands of the one who never fails. It's not the absence of problems. It's the presence of peace. That's why trusting him is enough. Because what you lack is not control. It's trust. Faith isn't knowing what's going to happen. It's knowing who you're with, even if you don't know what's coming. If this word is calming the storm inside you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I place my tomorrow in your hands." This is your declaration of faith today. This is your choice for deliverance now. This is not just a comment. It is a prophetic act. This is the moment you decide to let go of the oars and let him steer the boat of your life. But what if I told you that the biggest obstacle in your life might not be fear of the future, but fear of not being enough? What if what paralyzes you is not what lies ahead, but how you feel about yourself? What comes next will touch a wound that many hide, and few have the courage to confront. How many times have you looked in the mirror and silently asked yourself if you are really capable? Not out of vanity, but out of doubt. a doubt that eats away at you from within, even if no one notices. You put pressure on yourself, compare yourself, and belittle yourself. You stay silent when you should speak up. You give up before trying. You get stuck before you even start. All because, somewhere along the way, you believed that you were not good enough, that you were not smart enough, strong enough, or spiritual enough. And this belief became an invisible prison. The fear of not being enough paralyzes you. It makes you turn down opportunities, run away from relationships, and even doubt your calling. And when this sets in, even God's promises seem too far away for you. This fear is not new. It is ancient. It appears every time the impossible knocks on the door. Every time God calls us to something that, in our eyes, is too big. And that is exactly what happened to Moses. Yes, the one who freed the people from Egypt, the one who faced the Pharaoh, who opened the sea with a staff in his hand. Before all this, he doubted himself. He felt exactly what you may be feeling. Now, the certainty that God chose the wrong person. Imagine the scene. A man on the run, living in the desert, far from everything and everyone, wounded by a past that accused him. He had killed an Egyptian, had been rejected by his own people, and now he was just trying to survive by taking care of sheep. And there, in the silence of the desert, God calls him, a burning bush, a voice that echoes from eternity, and an impossible call to free the people of Israel from slavery. Moses' answer was not a yes full of faith. It was a series of excuses. He said that he did not know how to speak well, that he was slow of tongue, that no one would listen to him, that others would be better for the task. And then, God responds with a promise, "I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say." Exodus 4:12. This answer carries deep spiritual weight. God doesn't say that Moses was sufficient on his own. He says that he himself would make him sufficient, that it wasn't about ability but about presence, that it wasn't about eloquence but about obedience. When you trust in God, your weakness becomes a stage for his power to manifest. Have you ever noticed how the greatest insecurities usually appear when we are about to experience something new? This happens because the enemy knows the potential that is within you. He knows what God can do through your life. And the best way to stop you is to convince you that you are not capable, that you will fail, that you are worthless. But this is a lie that needs to be broken now. Because what God sees in you is different from what you see in the mirror. He doesn't see your limitations as barriers, but as opportunities to reveal the supernatural. He doesn't choose the most prepared. He prepares those he chooses. And that means nothing is lacking in you when you walk with him. Your identity is not in what they say about you. It is in what God has declared about you. And if you feel that you are not enough for what God has placed in your heart, maybe that is exactly why he chose you. Because you will not do it by the strength of your arm. You will do it by total dependence. You will do it by faith. Trust in God is what fills what seems to be missing. It's not about deserving. It's about grace. Look at your history. How many times have you overcome things you thought you couldn't? How many times has God sustained you when you thought you couldn't handle it? This is proof that he has been empowering you for a long time. You just need to remember who walks by your side. If this message is speaking to you, declare with faith in the comments, "Lord, I trust that your presence makes me sufficient." Write sincerely even if you are still afraid. This is your courageous response. It is the moment when you decide to trust God's voice more than your own doubt. But there are times when it's not just fear that stops us. It's the very landscape around us that seems to be falling apart. And if, even with faith, even with prayer, everything still seems lost, what you're about to hear in the next section may challenge everything you believe about loss, pain, and purpose. Because sometimes when all seems lost, that's exactly when the miracle begins. Have you ever experienced that moment when it seems like everything is falling apart around you? When there is nothing left to do? When the last hope slips through your fingers and you look around and see only ruins? It is not just sadness. It is despair. It is like being in a dark valley surrounded by the silence of pain and the feeling that God has forgotten you. You try to pray, but the words do not come. You want to believe, but the emptiness is greater. and deep down, a voice whispers, "It is over." It is at this time, when faith seems exhausted and life seems defeated, that many think, if God were with me, this would not have happened. But what if the darkest moment is the very soil where the miracle is about to blossom? What if the apparent end is actually the beginning of the resurrection? It was precisely in this scenario that we find one of the most impactful stories of Jesus' ministry, the death and resurrection of Lazarus. 3 days. That was how long Lazarus had been in the tomb when Jesus arrived. 3 days of pain for Martha and Mary. 3 days in which God's silence seemed like abandonment. 3 days in which their eyes were red from crying so much, and their hearts were broken by a loss that seemed irreversible. They had sent word to Jesus when Lazarus was still sick, but he delayed. He did not arrive in time. And now, it was too late. When Jesus arrives, Martha's first reaction is one of frustration. If the Lord had been here, my brother would not have died. How many times has that same phrase come to mind? If God had acted sooner, I would not have lost my life. If he had been with me, this would not have happened. And it is here that Jesus reveals something that changes everything. He does not simply comfort. He does not say that he will give strength to carry on. He declares something powerful. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. John 11:25. This is not just a promise for the hereafter. It is a revelation about the now. Jesus does not just say that he will raise Lazarus from the dead. He affirms that he himself is life, that where he is, death loses its power, that where he arrives, the end becomes the beginning. And in the face of unbelief and pain, he goes to the tomb. He orders the stone to be removed. He cries out loudly, "Lazarus, come forth!" And the impossible happens. The dead man comes forth. Loss becomes testimony. Tears become glory. When you trust, even in the absence of signs, even when all seems lost, God's life can blossom in the impossible. His silence is not absence. It is preparation. Delay is not disinterest. It is a staging of a greater miracle. The tomb is not the end. It is the stage where Jesus shows that nothing is irreversible when he is present. How many times have you buried dreams? How many times have you sealed the stone of never again over areas of your life that could still be touched by God? A marriage that fell apart, a relationship that ended, a project that failed, a door that closed, a pain that seemed incurable. You believed that there was no way back, that it was too late. But what this story shows is that with God, it's never too late. Nothing is ever truly lost. Maybe your Lazarus isn't a person. Maybe it's your faith, your hope, your identity. But today, Jesus stands at your tomb and he's saying, take away the stone. That means allowing him to come into the areas of your life that you've thought were dead. It means letting go of shame, of unbelief, of self-protection. Because life only invades that which allows itself to be touched. Can you imagine what would have happened if Martha had said that day, "No, Jesus, it's too late. Leave the tomb as it is"? Nothing would have changed. Not because Jesus couldn't, but because the stone of unbelief would have prevented the miracle. So today, you need to make this choice. Let Jesus remove this stone that prevents you from seeing life rising again. Are you willing to trust even when everything around you screams that it's over? If this word is awakening something within you, comment now. Jesus, remove the stone from my heart and resurrect what is dead. It's not just a phrase, it's a surrender, a cry, an invitation for him to come in where you've given up. But what? If I told you that sometimes what feels like God's absence isn't loss, but comparison? What if what's draining your joy isn't what you've lost, but what you think others have that you don't? What follows will reveal a truth few have the courage to face, the silent poison of comparison, and how trusting God fully frees you from this destructive cycle. It's hard to ignore that tightness in our chest that comes when we look around and feel like everyone else is moving forward except us. It seems like other people's doors open easily, while ours remain locked. Social media becomes a shop window that reminds us, with every swipe of a finger, that there are people with perfect families, perfect bodies, dream trips, happy marriages, opportunities that never came our way. And then silently we start to ask ourselves, why not me? What am I missing? This question grows like a weed inside our soul. It corrodes. It hurts. It harms our identity. It feeds the feeling of inadequacy. And, little by little, it turns into envy, even if we refuse to call it by name. It is a subtle poison, comparison. And it is more common than we would like to admit. Many people today live not according to God's direction, but according to the direction of Instagram, their neighbor, their co-worker, their younger sister. Comparison makes us forget that life is made up of individual processes, that each journey is unique, and that God works in a time that does not bend to human haste. It is in this context that Jesus tells us a profoundly provocative parable, that of the workers in the vineyard, Matthew 21:16. A story that challenges our sense of justice, but reveals a transformative secret about the heart of God and our worth in His eyes. In the parable, a vineyard owner goes out in the morning to hire workers. He finds some early in the morning and promises to pay them a denarius for each day's work. Then, throughout the day, he returns to the market several times and hires more people, including some late in the afternoon. Everyone, regardless of what time they started, receives the same amount at the end. This causes indignation among the early arrivals. They murmur, "Those who arrived last worked only 1 hour, and you treated them the same as us." This is where Jesus deconstructs human thinking. The owner of the vineyard responds firmly, "Friend, I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Or are you envious because I am generous?" Matthew 20:13-15. This response breaks us down, because deep down, we are those morning workers. We want to be rewarded not only for what we do, but also for our time, effort, and sacrifice. And more than that, we want God to follow logic and reward us according to the yardstick we use to measure the world. But the kingdom doesn't work that way. God's generosity is not based on performance. It is based on grace. And grace levels everyone. Those who arrived early, those who arrived late, those who almost didn't arrive. The grace reveals that when we trust in God, nothing is missing, even when it appears unequal to human eyes. How many times have you felt less loved by God when you saw someone receive what you still hope for? How many times has your heart filled with resentment when you heard the testimony of someone who received the blessing you have dreamed of for years? The parable reminds us of something essential. The problem is not that the other person has more. The problem is that you stopped looking at what you already received. Have you accepted God's calling? Has He promised to take care of you? So why doubt now? When we compare, we forget that God is personal. He does not distribute blessings in series. He builds custom-made destinies. What seems like a delay is often preparation. What seems like a shortage is just a strategic reserve for a more propitious time. What you think is missing may be exactly what protects you. This is the essence of complete trust, knowing that what God gives you is exactly what you need, at the right time, in the right way, by the right hand. There is nothing missing. Where there is eternal purpose, and this needs to be internalized, because if the enemy cannot distance you from God through pain, he will try to do it through comparison. He will try to convince you that you are being left aside, ignored, forgotten. But the truth is that you are being carved. Every weight has eternal value. Every apparent no is a character-building exercise. Every silence is an invitation to trust beyond what is seen. And when you understand this, envy loses its power. Your heart aligns, and your faith grows stronger, because you start living not by comparison, but by conviction. If this message has challenged you in any way, write in the comments, "Jesus, I trust my process. Your grace is sufficient for me." Declare this as an act of faith, as a cry for liberation, as a cure against the comparison that imprisons you. And if you know someone who lives feeling less than, share this video. Maybe, through you, that person will understand that what God has for them is unique and sufficient. Your like can be an instrument of God to reach other lives. If this word touched your heart, click like as an act of faith. But what if I told you that the feeling of abandonment you carry is not the absence of God, but a perception distorted by silence? What if what you think is loneliness is actually a scenario where God is closer than ever? Next, we'll delve into an unexpected scene, Jesus' most heartbreaking cry, and the revelation hidden in the apparent abandonment. What you're about to discover could transform your view of God's presence. It's strange how absence can seem heavier than the pain itself. The emptiness, the echo of a question that returns without an answer, the silence of God when everything inside us is screaming for help. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt as if the sky was closed to you? As if your prayer hit the ceiling and bounced back? As if God, the same God who worked miracles in the lives of others, had forgotten you? There are times when this feeling is not just an impression, it is despair. As if we are abandoned on an emotional battlefield, with our hearts bleeding and no help in sight. It is in these dark days that even faith seems like a pretty lie told at Sunday services. It is in these days that God's promises seem to belong to everyone but us. But what if I told you that even Jesus, the Son of God himself, went through this? On the cross, suspended between heaven and earth, between human judgment and heavenly silence, Jesus uttered one of the most impactful phrases in all of history. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. He who had healed so many now suffered without relief. He who had raised the dead now died alone. The Son who had lived in full communion with the Father now experienced what it was like to no longer feel that presence. This scene is not poetic. It is brutal. It is the cry of an innocent man bearing the guilt of all. But more than that, it is the portrait of God's greatest identification with his suffering. Because in Jesus, God doesn't just observe our abandonment, he lives our abandonment. He feels firsthand what it is like to hear no answer. And yet, he remains trusting. He remains believing. He remains obeying until the end. This is the truth that many ignore. The apparent absence of God is not a real absence. The Father was there, even in silence. Even when Jesus didn't feel him, he didn't turn his face away. He held everything together from the sidelines of eternity. And that's exactly what happens to us. What we call abandonment, God calls trust. How many times has the feeling of being alone made us doubt God's promises? How many times has the lack of signs made us believe there was no purpose anymore? But the cross teaches us that God's silence is not a sign of disinterest. It is a sign of a greater plan being executed. As Jesus cried out, the sky prepared to open on the third day. As pain took over the body, eternity was redeemed. This is where the paradox reveals itself. The moment when Jesus seems most distant from God is the moment when God is closest to humanity. In the cry of abandonment, reconciliation is born. In the pain of loneliness, the bridge between heaven and earth is born. And that changes everything. If even Jesus, in his perfection, faced an apparent silence, who are we not to face it? The difference is that he faced it and overcame it. And because he overcame it, you too can cross the desert of absence with the certainty that you are not alone. The same God who seemed silent on the cross rose again on Sunday and revealed himself with glory. So take a deep breath. Stop seeking God only where you feel him. Learn to trust when there is no emotion, when there is no vision, when there is no answer. Because faith is not being sure of the now. Faith is being sure that, even without seeing, he is here. Even if everything says otherwise, even if the heart doesn't feel it, even if the world mocks. A presence of God does not depend on your perception. It depends on his promise. And the promise is clear. I will be with you always, until the end of time. Matthew 28:20. Every day, not just the good ones, not just the ones you feel. Every day, even the ones with tears, even the ones with silence, even the ones with despair. If this word spoke to you, write in the comments. Even without feeling it, I trust that the Lord is with me. Declare this as a prayer of surrender. as a response to the pain of silence, as a faith that decides to continue, even without signs. But what if I told you that the weariness you carry isn't a lack of strength? It's excess weight that was never yours. What if you discovered that there is an invitation from Jesus that can change the way you face the burdens of life? What comes next could be the relief your soul has been silently crying out for. Sometimes the body seems to be whole, but the soul is exhausted, not from physical effort, but from fighting invisible battles every day. How many times have you woken up tired, even after hours of sleep? How many times have you smiled so as not to worry anyone, when inside you were falling apart? The exhaustion of carrying responsibilities, expectations, and pains that no one sees. The weight that slowly accumulates and suddenly you realize it's not just fatigue, it's exhaustion of the soul. It is at this point that many look up and ask, God, how long? How long will I walk without strength? How long will I pretend that everything is fine when I can barely breathe inside? And the most devastating thing is to feel that even with faith, even with prayers, true rest never comes. It is like running after something that always slips through your fingers. But what if I told you that? Did Jesus make a direct invitation to those who feel this way? Not a religious invitation, but a personal and urgent call of love. The setting was simple. There were no hysterical crowds or miracles happening at the time. Just Jesus looking into the eyes of his listeners and saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. It's not a physical rest. It's deeper. It's the kind of relief that no trip can offer. It's peace that can't be bought. It's a place where the soul can finally stop pretending to be strong and just breathe. But why? Then do so many remain exhausted, even knowing this promise? Because many still try to carry everything alone. They try to prove their worth. They try to control what escapes their hands. They try to win based on effort, when true victory comes from surrender. Jesus didn't call us to be strong all the time. He called us to trust. And trusting sometimes is stopping trying to solve everything and just resting in his arms. You see, when Jesus talked about burdens, he knew every detail of yours. He knew the bills you don't yet know how to pay. He knew the family conflicts you try to hide. He knew the thoughts that steal your peace at night. He doesn't offer conditional performance-based rest. He offers it because he loves you, because he knows that apart from him, you will keep trying to be strong until you break. He goes on to say, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Matthew 11:29. Notice, the invitation is to change burdens, to let go of what weighs you down and take on what helps you. Jesus' yoke is not the absence of problems, it is his presence in your problems. When you walk with him, you no longer have to overcome them alone. The pressure to be perfect disappears. The fear of failure fades. What was once despair is now direction. But trusting like this requires something that many avoid: vulnerability. Admit that you can't do it anymore, that you need help, that you need rest, that you need Jesus not only as your Savior, but as your relief. How many times have you tried to be everything to everyone and forgotten to just be a child? How many times have you measured your faith by your productivity, as if God only loved you when you were getting it done? This is a subtle but destructive lie, because it steals what Jesus came to offer: lightness. He did not promise a life without difficulties, but he promised a life with him. And in him, we lack nothing, not even rest for our weary souls. He doesn't demand any more effort from you. He invites you to sit, breathe, and trust. If you feel overwhelmed today, not just by circumstances, but on the inside, stop everything right now. Close your eyes for a second and imagine Jesus approaching you. He doesn't come with demands. He doesn't bring a list of demands. He simply reaches out and says, give me this burden, let me take care of it. All you have to do is trust. That's faith, not a performance, but a surrender. And maybe you think, but what if I let go and nothing changes? What if I trust and it still hurts? Jesus never said the pain would end immediately, but he did promise that, with him, it would be bearable, and more. That in the midst of the pain, you would find purpose, you would find direction, You would find rest, even without understanding everything. Nothing is lacking when you walk with the one who sustains all things. If this word has reached your heart, declare in the comments, "Jesus, I release what weighs me down." Write this as an act of faith, as a surrender that changes the destiny of those who have been carrying everything alone for too long. And if you know someone who is tired inside, send them this video. Maybe this message will be the rest he or she has been silently searching for all night long. But what if I told you that the lack of meaning in life is not a sign of failure, but rather an unrecognized divine calling? What comes next may be the answer your heart has always sought, but has not yet known how to name. Sometimes what hurts the most is not what you lost, but the feeling of never having found what you really came here to do. You may be surrounded by people, fulfill your commitments, even smile in public, but something inside you keeps asking, why? What is the point of all this? What am I here to do in this world? Is there a reason? Or am I just surviving, waiting for the days to pass? This is a silent pain, an absence that does not scream, but empties. It's like living on autopilot, doing what's expected, but feeling like something essential is missing, a purpose. And when the heart doesn't see meaning, everything becomes heavy, even things that should be light. When purpose is absent, even success tastes empty, because success without direction is just noise. A soul without a mission is a tired soul, lost in its own body. But what if I told you that is this restlessness not a sign of weakness, but rather a divine calling, a silent warning that there is something greater waiting for you? That this feeling of displacement may be the whisper of heaven, reminding you that you were not born by chance, you are not here by coincidence, and you have definitely not been forgotten. In the Bible, there is someone who felt exactly this: Jeremiah, a young man, insecure, afraid, who saw himself as too small to do anything great. But it was exactly to him that God said, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Jeremiah 1:5. God not only knew Jeremiah, he had already set apart a specific purpose for his existence, and that purpose did not depend on his age, experience, or self-confidence. It depended on one thing: obedience. But Jeremiah resisted. He said, "Oh, Lord God, I don't know how to speak, for I am just a boy." He thought he was incapable, unprepared, like many of us. How many times have you thought, "I'm not good enough. I'm not ready yet. This isn't for me"? Jeremiah thought that way, until he heard God's voice say, "Don't say you're just a boy. You will go to everyone I send you to." God wasn't concerned about what Jeremiah thought of himself, because when God calls you, he already knows exactly who you are, and yet he chooses you. Have you ever felt like your life is on pause, that everyone around you is moving forward, building, growing, and you're just standing still? Have you ever felt like your talents are buried, your voice muffled, your mission dormant? That's not failure. That's the moment before awakening, because where you see confusion, God sees pregnancy. When you trust that God has a purpose for your life, the scenario doesn't have to change immediately for peace to set in. Security does not come from circumstances, but from the certainty that he who formed you already knows where he is taking you. Jeremiah didn't become a prophet because he was the most talented. He became one because he answered the call. And that's what changes everything. It's not knowing the whole plan. It's trusting enough to take the first step. Your pain of not having clarity could be the push that heaven is using to make you ask what you never had the courage to ask. Your frustration can be exactly the fuel to seek an answer that does not come from the world, but from God. And when that answer comes, even if it is small, even if it is simple, it lights a flame. Because with direction, even the difficult path becomes bearable. Have you ever stopped to think about how many people need what only you can offer? How many lives can be transformed if you simply accept that there is an eternal purpose shaped for your heart? It doesn't matter if everything seems dark right now. The truth is that in God, there is no lack of direction. There is no lack of purpose. There is no lack of anything when you trust in the one who reveals the paths. If this message is speaking to you, comment right now. Lord, show me my purpose. Write this as a step of faith, as a sincere cry, because those who ask for direction with humility find revelation with grace. But what if I told you that what paralyzes people the most is not doubt, but the fear of failing while trying? What comes next could be exactly the liberation you've been waiting for, and never knew where to find it. Have you ever been so afraid of making mistakes that you preferred not to even try? Have you ever been faced with an opportunity but froze? Have you ever held a dream in your hands and let it slip away because you believed you weren't capable? The fear of failure, it doesn't scream. It paralyzes. It tells you that you're not ready, that you weren't born for this, that the worst is going to happen. And maybe, from listening to these inner voices so much, you've started to believe that you really can't do it, that you're alone, that there's not enough strength inside you. But what if I told you that? Could this fear, which limits you today, be exactly the place where God most wants to act? What if the failure you fear is just the scenario where Jesus will prove that He is the one who sustains you? There is a story in the Bible that powerfully reveals this truth. Peter's walk on the water. The night was dark. The wind was blowing hard. The disciples were in a boat in the middle of the sea, and suddenly a figure appeared among the rough waves, walking on the water. It was Jesus, but they did not recognize Him at first. They thought it was a ghost. Then He spoke, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter, with his heart pounding, said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." And Peter went. He got out of the boat and stepped onto the impossible. The sea, which should have swallowed him, supported his steps. But suddenly, he looked around. The wind, the waves, the fear. And then he began to sink. Peter cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus took him by the hand and said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. Pay attention to this detail. Peter walked on water. He lived the supernatural, but he sank when he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the circumstances. This shows that it is not the strength of the waves that brings us down. It is the weakness of our faith. Fear didn't overcome Peter. Doubt did. How many times have you been like him? Full of courage at the beginning, but overcome by fear halfway through? The fear of failure is sneaky. It disguises itself as prudence, logic, maturity. But in truth, it only wants one thing: to prevent you from seeing what God can do when you dare to believe. Trusting in God is like stepping where there is no ground. It is walking when everything says you are going to sink. It is looking to Jesus even with the winds screaming around. Because when trust is in Him, what seemed impossible becomes a road. When you give your steps to the Lord, nothing is lacking. No direction, no strength, no courage. Maybe you're stuck on a project you never started, a word you never said, a door God opened, but you didn't walk through. Because deep down, you believe you're going to fail. But look at what Peter's story shows us. Failing trying with Jesus is much better than standing in the boat in fear, because even when we sink, He reaches out. It is interesting that Jesus did not stop Peter from sinking. He allowed it, because there are lessons that only come when we feel the water reaching our chest. There are lessons we only learn when our strength fails, and all we can do is cry out. But notice, Jesus did not turn away. He was there, on the side, and He held Peter. This proves that even when we fail, grace reaches us, and faith, even small, has value when it is in the right place. Jesus did not demand perfection. He responded to a cry for help, and He still does. He answers when you say, "Lord, save me." Even if you have started to sink, He will not let you get lost. He is still reaching out. Now think with me. How many blessings may you have missed out on because you were afraid of making a mistake? How many paths have you not taken because you thought you would fail? What if fear is not the voice of God, but an echo of your own insecurity? Could your paralysis really be prudence, or is it disguised unbelief? This reflection is hard, but liberating. Oftentimes, what we call waiting on God is actually just a nice way of avoiding risk. But true faith walks. It moves. It treads water, even when afraid. It launches itself even when trembling. Jesus never promised you it would be easy. He promised He would be with you, and where there is His presence, there is no lack of help, there is no lack of forgiveness, there is no lack of a new beginning. Nothing is lost when you trust the hand that holds you. If this word spoke to you, write in the comments, "I'm going to get off the boat." This is your declaration of faith. It is you saying in public that you will choose to trust even when you are afraid, that you will walk even when you are trembling, that you will launch yourself even when you do not see everything clearly, because now you understand failure is only final when you give up trusting. And if you know someone who has been paralyzed by fear, share this video. Maybe this story is the outstretched hand that this person has been waiting for. But wait, what if the real problem isn't fear of failure, but rather doubt that God is really hearing your voice? What you'll discover in the next section could forever change the way you pray and believe. Have you ever been in a place where everything seemed too quiet, where the sky seemed silent, prayers didn't reach the ceiling, and your soul whispered in despair, "Is God listening to me?" This kind of silence hurts. It is not the absence of words, but the absence of an answer, an echo that pierces the soul and cries out in the void of uncertainty. Is my faith real? Does He still care? Sometimes God's silence echoes louder than any answer. It's in those moments when our hearts ask, is He still listening? When prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, when relief doesn't come, when our soul feels suffocated, that's when doubt whispers loudest. The pain of uncertainty about our faith can feel like a silent betrayal. If God really cares, why doesn't He speak? This pain is real. It eats away at your soul like a slow, invisible current. It's not about doubting God's existence. That's worse. It's about doubting whether He cares about you personally, whether He sees you, whether He hears you, whether He answers you. And maybe you're living that exact moment with your Bible open, but your heart closed, with your eyes full of tears, but without the courage to pray again. Have you ever thought about silently giving up on your faith? Many don't say it out loud, but they stopped believing a long time ago. They just continue because that's what's expected of them. But that was exactly where Thomas found himself, one of the 12. Someone who had walked with Jesus, seen miracles up close, heard promises straight from the Savior's lips, and yet he doubted. Jesus had died. The others said He had risen. But Thomas, crushed by disappointment, responded, with a pain that perhaps resonates with you today, "If I don't see the nail marks in His hands, I won't believe it." John 20:25. Thomas didn't just want a theological explanation. He needed a touch of something concrete, of a Jesus who was not only in the words of others, but present before his eyes. He wanted to feel, see, touch, because the pain of loss had torn his faith apart. But here's the most powerful part. Jesus did not rebuke Thomas in anger. He did not shame him. He showed up 8 days later, at a time when unbelief still lived in Thomas's heart. Jesus entered through the closed door, as if breaking through the emotional walls of our souls, and said with compassion, "Touch me. See? Stop doubting and believe." This moment changes everything because it shows that even in doubt, God visits us. May sincere doubt, born of pain and not pride, not drive Jesus away. It attracts Him. He knows the backstage of your soul. He knows your tiredness, the nights you asked for a sign, the prayers you forgot to say because you no longer believed they would make a difference. But He keeps coming, silent, faithful, patient, loving, and He comes with a promise. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. John 20:29. This is not a condemnation of doubt, but an invitation to trust, a promise of blessing to those who decide to trust, even when everything seems absent. This is where the deepest secret that Jesus reveals comes in. Nothing is missing when faith chooses to remain, even in the dark. Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps it is precisely this absence of answers that is forging a truer faith? That silence is not contempt, but maturation? That prayers are not being ignored, but are growing roots in the unseen, preparing a time of harvest that goes far beyond what you asked for? Trust in God is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to remain even with it, because faith is not a feeling, it is a choice. And if today all you have is the strength to say, "Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief," that is enough to touch the Father's heart. The faith that springs forth in the midst of a crisis is the faith that shines brightest in His eyes. And if you feel trapped in this silent pain, where faith seems small and fragile, know this: you are not alone. God is closer to those who are broken in spirit than to those who are strong in appearance. And there is a verse that can become your sustenance today. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm 23:4. Even without seeing, even without understanding, you are not helpless. His presence remains. And this valley of doubt will not be your end, but the scene of the most intimate miracle, the rebirth of your trust. If this message confronted you, declare in the comments, "Even in doubt, I choose to trust." This is not just a phrase, it is an act of faith. It is the kind of statement that shakes hell, because it shows that your faith does not depend on sight, but on decision. And if someone judges you for this, take a deep breath and remember, Jesus valued the faith of a sincere Thomas more than the appearance of confidence of many Pharisees. Don't hide your pain, bring it to light. Jesus does not reject those who approach Him with sincerity. But there's something almost no one notices in this story. And when you do, everything will change. What Thomas thought was his weakness was actually the soil where true faith would begin to flourish. Because the faith that resists silence, absence, and uncertainty is the one that most touches God's heart. And what comes next may be the answer your soul has long been waiting for. Because when Jesus enters the room of doubt, He doesn't just bring proof, He brings peace. And the next step on this journey is deeper than you might think. There are pains that time does not cure. No matter how much you move forward, no matter how much life changes on the outside, there are wounds that remain open, bleeding on the inside, silently. And what hurts the most is not what others see, but what no one notices. Untreated emotional wounds create invisible prisons. You walk, work, serve, smile, but inside, you are still paralyzed by a trauma that has never been confronted with the truth. How many times have you thought, "I should have gotten over this by now"? But you can't, because time alone has no power to heal what the soul still carries as an exposed wound. This pain is profound. It affects the way you relate to others, the way you see the future, the way you pray, the way you believe. It's like a constant echo of something that should have been resolved but was left pending. And perhaps you are living like that man at the pool of Bethesda, surrounded by promises, surrounded by possibilities, but emotionally stuck in the same place for years. The Bible says that the man had been sick for 38 years. 38 years waiting for a cure. 38 years waiting for something external to change his life. Every day he would lie down by the pool, waiting for the angel to stir the waters and for someone to put him in, because he couldn't do it alone. But no one would help him, and time passed. People would come and be cured, and he would remain there, paralyzed, abandoned, forgotten. How many times have you also felt that everyone around you seems to move forward, receive, be touched by God, while you remain in the same pain, waiting, crying, trying to believe, but each failed attempt only increases the weight on your soul. You have become accustomed to pain. It has become part of your identity. But Jesus does not see you as just another one among many. He enters your story. He walks towards you even when no one else does. And he asks the most disconcerting question anyone can hear after years of pain. Do you want to be healed? This question is not offensive. It is liberating. Jesus is not questioning whether you deserve to be healed. He is calling you to break out of the cycle of passive waiting, because there are times when pain becomes an excuse, a refuge, a hiding place. But when Jesus enters the scene, he confronts the root and not just the symptoms. The man responds with an excuse. "Sir, I have no one to help me get into the pool when the water is stirred." How many times have you responded to God like this? "Lord, I want to change, but I can't. I want to trust, but I've been hurt too much. I want to be free, but I always end up falling." Jesus doesn't ignore this man's story. He simply calls him out of it. And he says, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." This is the revelation that few understand. Healing is not in the tank. Healing is in the presence. What that man had been waiting for decades, God released in seconds with a single word. It wasn't the angel, it wasn't the water, it wasn't time. It was Jesus. And the same Jesus who entered that forgotten situation now enters your forgotten pain. He asks you today, in the face of everything you've been carrying for so long, do you still want to be healed? Because there are people who say they want it, but they have become so attached to the pain that they no longer know how to live without it. But today Jesus is releasing something stronger than memory. He is releasing identity. That man didn't just leave healed, he left walking, carrying what once carried him. You will also leave here with authority over what previously paralyzed you. Nothing is lacking when healing comes straight from the source. God's promises don't grow old with time. You may think it's past time, that no one cares anymore. But heaven never forgets. God saw every tear that no one else saw. He was there every night you pretended to be okay. And now, he invites you into a new cycle, a time where trusting in his presence is greater than the fear of pain. If this word exposed something you've been hiding for years, write in the comments, "I want to be healed." It's not just a sentence. It's a decision. It's you saying, "Lord, even after everything, I still want it. I still believe. I'm not going to let this trauma define me." Write it with faith, not for others, but as a prophetic act. Like someone who picks up their bed, gets up, and starts walking. And if you know someone who carries this silent pain, share this video. Maybe it is through your gesture that this person will hear the voice they have been waiting for so long. Because there are cures that God releases through connections. You can be the instrument of someone's liberation. But wait, what comes next may shake everything you believed about comparison and envy. There is a hidden truth in the behavior of many who live looking for what is missing in others. And what you will discover next may reveal the real reason for your dissatisfaction. Few people have the courage to face this, but when they do, they find freedom they never knew existed. Have you ever looked at someone else's life and thought, "Why isn't mine like that?" Maybe not out loud, but in a quick thought as you scroll through your Instagram feed, seeing that seemingly happy couple, that organized house, that professional success, that peace that seems unattainable to you. Comparison is treacherous. It disguises itself as admiration, but feeds on resentment. You start to feel that your life is behind, incomplete, insufficient. And little by little, envy takes hold where there used to be gratitude. This silent feeling consumes your peace because it puts the focus on what others have, rather than what God is doing in you. In the Bible, Jesus enters the home of two sisters, Martha and Mary. The scene seems simple and everyday. Martha, the hostess, is busy, anxious, preparing everything for the Master. She runs from one place to the other, trying to make sure everything is perfect. Mary, instead of helping with the chores, sits at Jesus' feet. She listens, she absorbs, she is present. Martha, seeing this, becomes angry. She feels she is doing the right thing, but Jesus does not praise her. He confronts her with love and says, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her." Lucas 10:41-42. This moment is profound. Martha was not wrong to serve, but she was so caught up in comparison and the expectation of doing more that she missed the opportunity to simply be with Jesus. She thought Mary was being unproductive, when in fact Mary was exactly where true transformation begins, at the feet of the Savior. How many times are you Martha when God calls you to be Mary? How many times do you find yourself running around, trying to prove yourself, justifying yourself to the world, competing for attention, applause, validation? And even though you do so much, you still feel empty inside, because what you need is not a life like everyone else's. It's a deep encounter with the presence that fills everything that's missing. Nothing is absent where Jesus is present. Envy arises when we believe that God is blessing others more than us. But what if I told you that What seems like fullness out there, could it just be appearance? And what you have now, even in the silence, could be just the right portion for your personal miracle. Mary didn't need to be busy to please Jesus. She just needed to position herself to listen. And that's what many people miss. They're so distracted by the performance of others that they don't notice what God is saying in private. Today, this comparison is intensified through social media. You see other people's highlights, but you experience the behind the scenes of your soul. And you forget that each person also struggles with pain that is not posted. The danger of comparison is that it kills your sense of purpose. You start measuring your life with the wrong ruler. What is success for one person may be a distraction for another. And what seems small to you may be being used by God to prepare something eternal. Jesus is not impressed by productivity. He is not looking at who has the most likes, followers, or results. He is looking at who is choosing the best part. What the world despises, silence, prayer, time in the Word, is what builds a life where nothing missing. Envy says, you need what others have to be happy. Heaven's truth says, you already have what is essential. You just need to trust. Can you stop for a moment and reflect on what has been creating dissatisfaction in your heart? Isn't it time to take your eyes off the pool of others and turn your eyes to the one in front of you? Because while Martha wanted to impress, Mary wanted to surrender. While Martha sought validation, Mary sought revelation. And that's what Jesus is calling you to live today, a life where the focus is not on what others have, but on who He is. If this message spoke to you, comment. Right now, Jesus is my best part. Say it like a prayer, like a statement, like a confession that dethrones comparison and restores confidence. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about resting in the fact that God has already given you exactly what you need for now. And if you know someone who is constantly comparing themselves, share this video. Send it as a spiritual gift. This may be the moment when this person hears, for the first time, that they no longer need to prove anything. They just need to trust. But what if I told you that there is something even deeper in the turmoil of the mind than comparing yourself to others? What comes next will take you to a dark but necessary place, the place where thoughts run so fast that not even prayer can reach them. The next block reveals what few have the courage to admit, but which could be the beginning of the liberation your mind so desperately needs. Have you ever felt like your mind won't stop? As if there were a whirlwind of thoughts all the time, running over each other, each one with a louder, more demanding, more desperate voice. Maybe you are living like this right now, smiling on the outside, but exhausted on the inside from so much thinking, planning, anticipating, fearing. It is not a lack of faith. It is accumulated emotional fatigue, a wear and tear that does not begin in the body, but in the heart, and mainly in the thoughts. The enemy knows that if he can confuse your mind, he can block everything else, and that's why this pain is so silent. Because no one sees it. No one realizes how much it hurts not to be able to rest, even when sleeping. How tiring it is to live with your head full of what if, why not, will it work out? An overloaded mind becomes an internal prison. And the worst part? Often it's inside this prison that you try to seek God's voice. But everything seems muffled, distant, unrecognizable. Does God even care about the chaos in our minds? Yes, He does care. And living proof of this is the story of Elijah, one of the greatest prophets in the Bible, a man used by God to confront kings, challenge false gods, and call down fire from heaven. But after one of the greatest miracles of his life, Elijah goes into such a deep crisis that he runs away into the desert and asks to die. He says, "Enough, take now, O Lord, my soul." 1 Kings 19:4. Yes, the same Elijah who faced hundreds of prophets of Baal now stood under a tree, wishing it would all be over. Have you ever felt this way? Strong in the eyes of others, but completely exhausted within yourself, as if the weight of the world was on your shoulders and your mind would no longer let you live in peace? What happens next is one of the most tender and revealing moments in the entire Bible. God doesn't send a sermon. He sends an angel, and this angel comes not with judgment, but with care. He touches Elijah, offers him food, and says, "Get up and eat, because the journey will be too great for you." Wes Kings 19:7. This is so powerful because it shows that God doesn't just see the exhaustion of the body, he sees the burden of the soul. Elijah didn't need more responsibilities. He needed rest. He needed sustenance. He needed a break to reorganize his thoughts before the presence. And that's what God did. He took care of his physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Elijah went to the cave, a place of isolation, but it was there, in the midst of the silence, that he found God's voice again. Not in the strong wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a gentle breeze. God speaks clearly, but sometimes our minds are so noisy that the volume of heaven seems low. That's why he calls us to silence, to rest, to trust. Nothing is lacking when your mind is stilled in the truth of the promise. What seems like absence is preparation. What seems like silence is care. Maybe you just need to rest. Stop trying to understand everything. Trust that God is taking care of the unseen part, including your thoughts. It's not weakness to admit that you're tired. It's wisdom. Elijah was one of the greatest prophets in history, and yet he broke down. That didn't disqualify him, it humanized him. And that's precisely when God revealed himself in a more intimate way. You don't have to carry it all alone. Your mind doesn't have to be an endless battlefield. God is here touching you like he touched Elijah, saying, "Get up, eat, rest. I am with you." The road may be long, but you are not alone in it. If this word touched your heart, write in the comments, "Lord, calm my mind." May this be more than a request. May it be a surrender, a deep cry from someone who is tired of thinking so much, of controlling everything, and now just wants to trust. Comment as if you are opening your heart and saying, "God, I can't stand this noise anymore. Give me your peace." And if you know someone who lives with a warring mind, send them this video. Maybe this message is the sign that person needs. To understand that it's not broken, it's just tired, and that Jesus has relief even for the thoughts that no one knows. But what if I told you there was a pain even more common, and often more hidden, than an overwhelmed mind? What you are about to hear now touches on a point that everyone has felt, but few have the courage to admit: loneliness. What comes next reveals a powerful truth that can change the way you see the moments when you feel invisible. Brace yourself. What comes next may restore the hope your soul had buried. There is a kind of pain that does not scream, does not bleed, is not seen in the eyes, but is carried in silence. It is the pain of loneliness. It is not just being alone. It is invisible, forgotten, irrelevant. It's sitting in the middle of a crowd and still believing that no one really notices you. Maybe you're going through this right now, even though you're surrounded by people. Maybe no one sees what you're going through, but you feel like you're in an emotional desert, dry, without direction, without a welcoming look that says, "I am with you." The pain of loneliness makes us doubt even God's care, because if he sees all things, why do you still feel abandoned? It can be so cruel that even God's silence seems to scream the opposite of his promise. But there is a story in Scripture that reveals a profound truth, a truth that can restore your hope right now. Hagar was an Egyptian servant, a woman with no voice, no power, no choices. She was used, discarded, humiliated. When she became pregnant by Abraham, her relationship with Sarah became unbearable. And then, without support, without protection, Hagar fled to the desert, literally alone, pregnant, abandoned, invisible. It was in this scenario of total vulnerability that God intervened. An angel appeared in the middle of the desert and called her by name, Hagar, Sarai's servant. Genesis 16:8. He knew who she was, where she came from, and what she was feeling. And there, in scarcity, in abandonment, God sees her. The most moving thing is that after this encounter, Hagar is not only comforted, she gives the Lord a name, an intimate name, full of pain and hope. "You are the God who sees me." Genesis 16:13. This verse isn't just beautiful, it's revolutionary for those who feel invisible. Because in a time when servant girls had no voice, Hagar discovered that heaven was hearing her moans before she even spoke. Aren't you also in that position today? You run away from something that hurt you. You carry promises that seem distant, and you feel like no one is following your journey. But there is a gaze that never leaves you, a care that never loses sight of you. Even in the desert, even when everything seems silent, you are being seen. God's presence is not only manifested in visible miracles, it is often revealed in the subtlety of consolation, in the way you still breathe, even when everything falls apart. God's gaze upon you is not a distant gaze. It is a gaze that moves in your favor, that calls you by name, that sees your tears even when you hide from everyone. Hagar returned from the desert with a revelation that changed the way she walked. God sees me. And this sentence needs to be your declaration as well. You may be surrounded by silence right now, but that does not mean absence. In fact, God's silence is often the space where He hides you to heal, to teach, to protect. Nothing is missing when the Father's gaze is upon you, and even though everything seems invisible to human eyes, heaven continues to pay attention to every detail of your life. Maybe today you are looking for that look, a sign that God still cares about you, still loves you, still is with you. And He responds, not with explanations, but with presence. As He did with Hagar, He didn't erase the pain. He showed up in the midst of it, and that changes everything. If this word spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "I am seen by God." Let this be a declaration of faith and resistance. No matter what the world says, no matter who has ignored, rejected, or abandoned you, you are known by the God who searches hearts, who goes into the desert for you, who bends down to listen, even to your silences. Declare as if you were facing loneliness and saying, "I am not alone," and share this message with someone who is experiencing the same emptiness. Maybe there is a Hagar near you without you realizing it. Someone who also needs to hear that there is a God who sees, who cares, who is present even when everyone else turns their face away. But what if the feeling of being alone isn't just about the absence of company, but the impression that not even God is listening anymore? What if the prayer has been said so many times that you feel like you are talking to the wind? What follows touches on the most intimate aspect of faith when you pray and nothing happens. This next story could be the mirror your soul needs and the key to renewing your trust in God's promises. You may have borne the brunt of silence and loneliness, just like Hagar, feeling like no one sees you. But what about when you pray, cry out, pour yourself out before God, and nothing happens? What do you do when the sky seems like bronze and the waiting becomes more painful than the original pain? There is a story in the Bible that lays this kind of pain bare and reveals something powerful. When you truly trust in God, even in silence, absolutely nothing is missing. Imagine the scene: a silent temple, an inattentive priest, and a woman, kneeling, crying without saying a word. Her lips move in despair, but no sound comes out. To someone watching from the outside, it might seem like a banal scene, or even embarrassing. That is exactly how Hannah was judged by Eli, the priest. He thought she was drunk, but Hannah was sober and broken. She could no longer bear to live with the pain of a promise that never came. Peninnah, her husband's other wife, mocked her. Year after year, Hannah went up to the temple, her heart bleeding and her eyes brimming. How many times must she have asked herself, "Why me, Lord? Why doesn't my prayer work? Has the Lord forgotten me?" And perhaps this is the cry of many today. Time passes, hope diminishes, and God's silence seems to scream louder than any human clamor. Have you ever been in that place, where praying seems in vain, where bending the knee becomes just another routine without an answer? There is something in this story that almost no one notices. It is not because God is silent that He is inactive. Heaven may seem closed, but God's plan is still in motion. Even without knowing it, Hannah was being prepared to bear a prophet, not just a son. Samuel was not just an answer for her, but a game changer for the entire nation of Israel. The Bible says in 1 Samuel 1:19, "The Lord remembered Hannah." This phrase may seem simple, but it carries a weight of glory. God does not forget those who cry out with a broken heart. He does not ignore the tears that no one sees. The problem is that many times his answer comes differently than we expect, and at a time when we least expect it. Hannah not only had her prayer answered, she had her identity restored. From barren woman to mother of a prophet, she experienced the miracle that only happens when faith perseveres even in the absence of visible signs. This shows us something essential. True trust in God does not depend on immediate answers. Trust is knowing that even when nothing seems to happen, nothing is missing because He is working beyond what the eyes can see. What if your prayer is generating something much greater than what you asked for? What if, behind your waiting, God is preparing something that will impact lives around you? Anna asked for a child, but she received a mission. She wanted relief, but she received a legacy. And it all started with a prolonged no. Sometimes what seems like silence is actually the making of the perfect scenario. God does not waste pain. He does not ignore prayers. When you place your hope in Him, His time becomes sufficient. And it is in that space between prayer and answer that character is shaped, faith is refined, and intimacy with the Father grows. Now take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this message. If you have been praying without seeing any results, if you have thought about giving up because you feel invisible, know this: the Lord remembered Hannah, and He remembers you too. Don't let waiting steal your faith. Don't believe the lie that God has forgotten you. There is a promise being formed in the unseen, and when it comes to light, you will understand why you had to wait so long. If you feel this word spoke to your pain, declare in the comments, "God, I trust even though I don't see." Don't be ashamed to affirm your faith. It is this courage to continue believing in silence that moves the heart of God. And if you know someone who needs this word, share this video as an act of love. It may be just what that person needs to not give up. But what if what's holding you back in life isn't waiting, but the fear of losing everything you already have? What if true freedom lies in trusting that even in the face of loss, God is still holding everything together? What you are about to hear now could completely change the way you see suffering. Keep going. What comes next may be the answer your soul has always been silently waiting for. You may have been praying for so long, like Hannah, waiting for something that never seems to come. And when everything goes silent, your heart weakens. But what if the pain doesn't just come from waiting? What if what scares you the most is losing what you already have? Family, health, stability. What if everything fell apart from one moment to the next? Would you still be able to trust that nothing is missing when God is present? There is a man in the Bible who lived through this very abyss and came out of it with something many never find: an unshakable love for God, even in the midst of ruin. The story of good does not begin with loss. It begins with fullness. He was prosperous, upright, God-fearing. He had children, wealth, health. He had everything that many of us pray for. And precisely because of that, the shock is so brutal. In the blink of an eye, he loses everything. His children die. His possessions are destroyed. His health deteriorates. He is covered with sores, judged by friends, accused by his own wife. Job doesn't just suffer, he is crushed. Imagine the pain of seeing all your children's coffins being carried out on the same day, the feeling of helplessness as you look out over fields that once bore fruit and are now burned, the heavy silence of the house that was once full of laughter and now echoes empty. Who could bear that without going mad? But Job does something unthinkable. He does not curse God. He tears his clothes, prostrates himself, and worships. This is not resignation. This is revelation. Job does not trust God because everything is going well. He trusts because knows whom he has believed. Your faith is not based on what God gives, but on who God is. It is in this place of total ruin that Job utters one of the most powerful phrases in the Bible: "I know that my Redeemer lives." Job 19:25. He doesn't say this when he sees the restoration. He says this in the midst of destruction. He doesn't wait for a miracle to trust. He trusts while everything is still in ruins. And here's the point. True, faith is not measured when everything is going right. Real faith is revealed when everything falls apart, when the account is zero, when the diagnosis comes, when betrayal happens. And yet, you choose to trust, even without answers, even among the rubble. Do you feel like your life is collapsing? That you are losing what you have built with so much effort? That your health is slipping through your fingers? That people you love are moving away for no reason? That your stability is shaking? Then this message is for you. Nothing you have lost is greater than what God can still restore. But more than that, the true miracle is realizing that God's presence is sufficient, even when everything seems lacking, because faith is not insurance against loss. It is the bridge that takes us back to the center of God's heart when everything around us falls into ruins. Job was restored. Yes, he received double of all that he had lost. But this part of the story, as glorious as it is not the apex. The climax was when, in the midst of his pain, he recognized that God was still worthy of worship. The real miracle was not what Job received, it was what he became. What if God allows some things to be taken from you in order to give you something that no one can steal? What if the ruin is the preparation for the rebirth of a deeper, more real, more intimate faith? Maybe you are living in this desert right now. Maybe you have been torn away from everything that gave you security. But take a deep breath, close your eyes, and imagine the Father saying to your heart, I am still here. I am still everything you need. Don't be afraid to lose what is fleeting when you have in your hands what is eternal. What really matters, no one can take it away. God's grace, love, presence, it remains, even in pain, even in loss, even when all that's left is the ground, and you still choose to bend your knees. If this word spoke to your soul, comment now. Even if everything falls apart, I trust in you, my Redeemer. It's not just a comment, it's a statement of faith. It's how you transform chaos into an altar. But what if the pain isn't about what you lost, but about what you never achieved? What if what's holding you back isn't the loss, but the feeling that your life just isn't moving forward? What comes next could be the spiritual push your soul has been waiting for years. The pain of losing everything can break us. But there is another pain that silences us inside, the one that doesn't explode, but paralyzes us. It's the anguish of those who don't see any change, even when they fight. It's when you pray, try, wait, and nothing seems to happen. Have you ever felt stuck, trapped in a routine that silently consumes your dreams? The story you're about to hear may reveal what's holding you back from starting over, and why, in God, movement starts from the inside out. The crowd was rushing through Jericho. Jesus was on his way. It was a decisive moment, but for many it was just another ordinary day. Among those people on the side of the road was someone forgotten, Bartimaeus, the blind man of Jericho. No vision, no opportunities, no recognized name, just a muffled cry by a society that imprisoned him not with chains, but with indifference. What makes this story so powerful is not just the healing itself, but the position where the miracle was born. On the side of the road, Bartimaeus was not inside the synagogue, nor among the disciples. He was outside, excluded, as many feel today, outside of the plans, the promises, the answers. Watching life pass by while remaining immobile inside, he heard that Jesus was passing by. And at that moment, something inside him broke the cycle of stagnation. He didn't see Jesus, but he recognized his presence, and he began to cry out, loudly, in desperation, in faith, Son of David, have mercy on me. It was as if he were saying, I won't accept living like this anymore. It doesn't matter if no one hears me. I know who is here. The voices tried to silence him. How many times does the same thing happen to you? The voices of fear, trauma, insecurity, trying to convince you that it's not worth crying out, that you were born to stay where you are, that your condition won't change. But Bartimaeus screamed even louder, and at that moment, Jesus stops. Heaven is silent before the faith of someone who refuses to accept paralysis as destiny. Jesus calls him. And here something surprising happens. Instead of going straight to the miracle, Jesus asks a question. What do you want me to do for you? Mark 10:51. The answer seems obvious, but it wasn't. The question was not about physical vision. It was about how much Bartimaeus was willing to choose the movement, because some people get so used to the place of pain that they forget there is a way out. And he answers clearly, Lord, I want to see. He didn't ask for riches or prestige. He asked for what would set him free. And at that moment, Jesus says, Go, your faith has saved you. And he immediately regains his sight and follows Jesus along the way. He doesn't just regain his sight, he finds direction. Can you see the power of this scene? Bartimaeus not only sees, he starts walking. He who was immobilized by the system, by the past, by the voices, now moves with purpose. He leaves the place of stagnation and enters the journey of purpose with Jesus. This story reveals something profound. Sometimes what's holding you back isn't a lack of blessing. It's a dormant faith. It's the fear of breaking away from what's familiar, even when it's hurting you. It's the doubt about whether you can really experience something new with God. But what Jesus is saying today is, I stopped for you. Now tell me, what do you want me to do for you? The first movement is not in the body, it is in the soul. We must cry out for help, yes, but we must also respond with faith, because there is a difference between wanting to be healed and being willing to change our lives. Jesus does not force deliverance. He responds to genuine calls. If you feel stuck, trapped, paralyzed, not because you don't want to walk, but because you don't know how anymore, then this word is for you. Trust that when you activate your faith, Jesus stops everything just to listen to you. What seems like stagnation is just the antechamber of a new beginning. Comment now. Lord, I want to see and follow your path. Declare it with faith in the comments. It's not just about writing. It's about taking the first step toward what God has for you. And if you know someone who is feeling stuck, share this video with them. It might be just the shout-out they need. And here comes a detail that few people notice in this story. Jesus did not go to Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus went to him. The miracle was released when he moved. And what does that say about you? About your faith? About where your life ended? Up! What's coming next may reveal that the faith you let fall asleep is exactly what will lift you up again. Have you ever felt like you can't move forward, as if something invisible was blocking your steps? And when you finally try to move forward, an internal voice reminds you of everything you've done, of every mistake, every failure, every decision you'd like to erase. Guilt can be more paralyzing than fear, but there is a powerful truth being forgotten, and it can break the chains you carry from the past. The night was dark. Jesus was arrested. The disciples were scattered, and Peter, the one who had promised never to abandon him, now trembled before a fire. 3 times he had been confronted. 3 times he had denied it. I do not know him. Words spoken in fear, but which cut the heart like a sword. When the rooster crowed, Jesus' gaze met his, and there Peter wept bitterly. The pain of betraying the one who loves you most, of falling exactly where you swore to remain standing. This is the guilt that many know inside, but hide on the outside. The shame that remains even after forgiveness. That feeling that you are not worthy of starting over, that your mistake has nullified your worth. Maybe you're living with this burden, trying to move on, but something always pulls you back. An abortion, a betrayal, a wrong choice. A word said that you would give anything to undo. And then you ask yourself, how can God trust me after this? But the beauty of this story lies precisely in what happens next. Jesus is resurrected, and instead of confronting Peter harshly, he calls him closer. At the seashore, another bonfire is lit. But this time, it is not a scene of denial. It is one of restoration. 3 times, Jesus asks, Peter, do you love me? And with each answer, a wound is touched, a regret is redeemed, a destiny is restored. Then Jesus says, feed my sheep, John 21:17. In other words, Peter, I still trust you, and here is the truth that sets you free. God does not cancel people because of their mistakes. He restores based on repentance. Jesus does not choose perfect people, he calls willing hearts. Peter fell, but was raised to be the leader of a generation. He who denied then had the courage to die for the love of Christ. This is what the true faith does. Transforms guilt into purpose, shame into mission, tears into spiritual authority. You may have failed badly, but that does not disqualify you for God's plans. If you are breathing, it is because there is work still in progress. Heaven does not shelve its promises because of your fall. When you surrender to God, He rewrites your story with grace. But be careful. There is a difference between guilt and regret. Guilt keeps you tied to the past. Regret propels you into the future. And that's why Jesus asks, "Do you love me?" Because loving Christ is the beginning of every new beginning. What defines your path is not what you did wrong, but what you decide to do from now on. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Feel Jesus gaze upon you, not with condemnation, but with compassion. He's not pointing his finger. He's reaching out, just like he did with Peter, just like he does with you now. Declare in the comments with faith, "Jesus, I accept your restoration over my story." It's not just a phrase. It's an act of courage. It's you answering the question that echoes in your spirit. Do you love me? And if you know someone living under the weight of guilt, share this message with him. It might be just the thing to set you free. And here's something that almost no one realizes. Peter was not rebuked by Jesus. He was reminded of how much he was still loved. What if you discovered that the restoration you so desperately seek depends not on how you feel, but on how much you believe? What comes next may be the most transformative step in your journey with God, because forgiving yourself can be the greatest miracle of your life. You may have already felt the guilt being ripped from your soul, and yet you still can't sleep peacefully, because forgiveness cleanses the past, but it is the true peace that sustains the present. And there is something that almost no one talks about. Many are forgiven by God, but remain prisoners of a war that takes place within them. What if I told you there is a promise hidden in the words of the resurrected Christ that can end this storm right now? The scene was silent, but full of tension. The doors were locked. Fear filled the air. The disciples were gathered together, but each one's heart was beating out of rhythm. What would happen now? Would they be arrested too? Was it all over? The absence of Jesus seemed to have also taken away the tranquility of life. But suddenly, he appears. He doesn't knock. He doesn't ask permission. He simply walks in, as only peace can enter, breaking the logic of reason, crossing the walls of fear. And then, in the midst of anxiety, insecurity, and doubt, Jesus says, "Peace be with you." John 20:19. It was no ordinary greeting. It was a spiritual release. It was the answer their hearts were waiting for, but they couldn't name it. Maybe you are experiencing exactly this. From the outside, the house may seem in order, but inside, the rooms of your soul are locked, full of memories that hurt you, frustrated expectations, racing thoughts that prevent you from resting. Your body wakes up, but your heart never sleeps. Your routine continues, but your soul screams in silence. You cry out for rest, but it is not physical. It is internal. The peace the world offers is conditional. The peace of Jesus is supernatural. And that's the difference. World peace depends on wages falling, diagnoses improving, marriages working out, things being fine. But what about when they aren't? And when everything seems stable on the outside, but inside chaos never stops roaring? That's where this revelation comes in. True peace is not the absence of external war. It is the presence of Jesus within the chaos. The disciples were still surrounded by threats. But when Jesus enters, everything changes without anything changing outside. Why, when we trust in Him, even in the midst of the storm, nothing is missing? Do you feel it? This restlessness? This silent anguish? How many times have you tried to fill that hole with distractions, with work, with pleasure, with goals? But the soul remains restless because it only finds rest in the one who created it. And here's the key point. Jesus didn't say, "Peace be with you." He said, "My peace I give you," John 14:27, i.e., it is not a generic peace. It is the same peace that lived in the heart of Jesus while he was betrayed, abandoned, crucified, an unshakable peace, which does not depend on circumstances. Do you need this peace? Not as an idea, but as an experience, a presence that invades your soul on good days and bad, that calms your heart when the news is not good, that sustains you when everything seems to fall apart. But there is a secret hidden in this peace. It is activated by trust. You can't experience God's rest while you try to control everything on your own. Peace only comes when you give up being your own refuge. Jesus entered that locked room without turning the doorknob. He still does this today, even with the doors of your soul closed by trauma, by fear, by disappointment. He enters, he presents himself, and he says, "My peace I give to you," not as the world gives, not as a deferred promise, but as a present reality. Take a deep breath now. Feel it. Imagine Jesus standing before you. His gaze is firm but serene. His voice is soft but full of authority. And he is saying, "Peace, I am here." If this message spoke to your soul, declare in the comments, "Jesus, install your peace within me." It's not just a comment. It's a prayer with a name. It's the beginning of your liberation. It's the echo of your decision to trust. And if you know someone who lives in an inner war, share this video. You can be the channel through which the peace of Christ reaches a soul that can no longer bear living in conflict. And here's what almost no one has told you. The peace of Jesus is not light because the problem is gone. It is light because now he is the one carrying it with you. But what if I told you that what comes next may reveal why your faith hasn't broken yet? There is something deeper, and that is precisely what many ignore. Have you ever felt the peace of God invade your interior? And yet some days, everything seems to fall apart again? It's as if your heart is given rest, but your mind, still wounded, begins to doubt. And if, deep down, you ask yourself, will he really act for me? There is a silent pain that affects millions of hearts, the feeling that faith is not enough to move the impossible. But what if this weakness is exactly what God needs to act? Imagine the scenario. A desperate father with his son in torment, a boy who was convulsing, foaming at the mouth, throwing himself on the floor. It was more than physical suffering. It was open spiritual warfare, and that father had already tried everything. The disciples tried to help, but nothing happened. Failure echoed like a sentence. Perhaps there, the last flame of hope was going out, and it was in that moment of tension, tiredness, and disbelief that he turns to Jesus and says, "If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Marcos 9:22. This sentence carries more than a doubt. It reveals the pain of those who believed before and saw nothing happen. Maybe you are like this too. You prayed, you asked, you waited, and nothing changed. And today, deep inside your heart, there is this muffled question, will God really help me? Jesus looks at that father and does not condemn him. He does not push him away. He does not shame him for his fragile faith. On the contrary, he responds with power and compassion. Everything is possible for him who believes. And at that moment in tears, the father declares, "I believe, help me in my unbelief." Marcos 9:24. This is one of the most human and most powerful phrases in the Bible, because it shows that faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the choice to continue in the midst of it. It is the sincere confession of someone who does not pretend to be strong but gives himself with everything he has, including his weaknesses. And it is precisely this type of faith that moves heaven, because it does not come from pride, but from total dependence on God. Have you ever felt this way? Torn between believing and doubting? Trying to keep the faith, but reality insists on reminding you otherwise? You look around and see no way out. The doors remain closed. The promises seem distant. Your heart wants to believe, but your mind sabotages you with scenarios of failure. And then you feel too small for God to see you or consider you worthy of a miracle. But here's the revelation. It is not the strength of your faith that sustains the miracle. It is the power of Jesus that responds to even the most wavering faith. Jesus does not demand perfection. He responds to sincere cries. He acts where there is truth, not where there is performance. Perhaps what is preventing you from experiencing God's action, not a lack of faith, but a fear of being vulnerable before Him. You don't need a huge faith. You just need to give what you have. The hurt faith, the tired hope, the exhausted heart. And when you do this, Jesus acts. Because when we trust, even when we are afraid, nothing is lost. Jesus rebukes the spirit, lifts the boy up, and delivers him restored to his father. A miracle happens before everyone's eyes. But the greatest miracle, perhaps, was not the boy's liberation, but the transformation of the father's heart. Because that day he discovered that God acts even when faith fails. If you are living in this moment, declare right now in the comments, "Lord, I believe, but help me in my unbelief." Say it with courage. Say it with tears if necessary, but say it. Because this confession could be the beginning of your miracle. And if that word touched something deep within you, click like as an act of faith. Maybe your click won't change the video, but it could be the spark that rekindles faith in another heart that will watch after you. Share this video with someone who is at the edge, someone who has thought about giving up. You can be the instrument God wants to use to say, "It's not over yet. Nothing is lacking for those who trust." Even if that trust comes with tears and shaking hands, Jesus sees, Jesus understands, Jesus acts. You don't have to pretend to be strong. You just have to surrender. If you have come this far, it is because the Spirit of God is leading you. None of this was by chance. Every story, every pain shared, every word released in this video touched something inside of you because heaven is moving over your life. Maybe you started this video tired, incredulous, carrying doubts, traumas, or silently asking, "Does God still care about me?" But now, at this very moment, there is a new fire being rekindled within you. Something in you has changed. There is a weight lifted from your shoulders. Because when you trust, even with fear, even with failures, even with tears, God acts. And what seemed to be missing, you discover was always present. The grace of Jesus sustaining you. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be real. And it was this surrender, this vulnerable heart before God that made room for this transformation. Today, the sky reminds you, nothing is missing when you trust. Nothing. No love, no direction, no healing, no hope. You are complete in Him. Now, take a deep breath, because what you are about to experience could seal that change. Shall we pray together? But first, let your heart break completely. Close your eyes and imagine Jesus at your side, placing His hands on you, saying with love, "Son, daughter, I have never left you. Just trust. I am here." This prayer is no ordinary one. It is the seal of everything God has spoken to you thus far. She is the answer your soul has been silently begging for. It is time to surrender, to be free, to be restored. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, we come before you with all that we are. No masks, no reservations, no defenses. We know that at many times faith wavered, hearts doubted, and eyes filled with tears that no one saw. But today, Lord, we choose to trust, even with shaking hands. With a heavy heart, we declare, you are our refuge, you are our peace, you are our hope. Come, Lord, touch the open wounds, heals old pains, restores what was broken, raise what has fallen, strengthens what is weak, make the new. Today we say, I believe, help me in my unbelief. Free me, Jesus, free from the voices that lie, from the memories that paralyze, from the sins that shame. May each person who is praying now feel the presence of your Spirit flooding this environment, bringing life where there was death, light where there was darkness. We trust. And so we declare, nothing is missing because we have you. Amen. If this prayer spoke to you, click like as an act of faith. This isn't just a button. It's a public testimony that God is healing you. Now pay close attention. The video that is appearing on your screen right now is the direct continuation of this message. If this touched you, what you will hear next may be the answer you have prayed for years. Don't leave without watching. What comes next may be what you needed for your deliverance. God wants to take you deeper. More healing, more revelation, more transformation. Comment now. I made it to the end. This is not just a comment. It is a cry of victory. It is a mark in the spiritual saying that you did not give up. Share this message with someone who needs a touch from God. You can be the instrument that changes a life. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This channel isn't just content. It's heavenly guidance for your journey. Subscribe and activate the bell. Each new video could be an answer you didn't even know you needed. You are no longer alone. You are part of something bigger. You are part of this family. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6, remember, in Jesus, absolutely nothing is missing.